I was made aware of this invitation quite late. It is not in the habit of the ministry and government to appear late, especially where they are journalists. I don't have a prepared speech, but I thought that I could also contribute in terms of what my colleagues have said. First, I actually want to thank Mr. Mtombeni for coming up with this initiative. I think that there is this very wrong perception that the responsibility of fighting corruption is a responsibility of government. And I think that you have taken the initiative to have this kind of forum as a private citizen or as a corporate citizen yourself, which means this responsibility is not for individuals. So I think that it is unfair for anybody to expect government that they must arrange this kind of forums on its own. I think that every individual who is affected by corruption has a responsibility to make sure that we fight corruption and we fight corruption together. I represent government. Is government committed to fighting corruption? Absolutely. There is no other institution that is big in fighting corruption than the government itself, because we don't believe that corruption will take our economy far. We don't believe that the corruption will will help us fast-track the economic recovery that we do require. We believe that corruption actually undermines development and undermines the progression of society. And this is why the head of state and government, the president, Comrade Robert Mugabe, has been very clear at various fora saying that we must nip corruption in the bud. Those that are accused of corruption, evidence must be gathered and they must be arrested and they must pay the price. I think he outlined the various occasions where the president has spoken against corruption. We've just come out as a political party, we've just come out of our 6th National People's Congress, where the message, not only coming from the leadership, but also the message coming from the delegates who are from all over the country, has been no to corruption, and those leaders who are corrupt must be arrested. And the president, again at this platform, said the same things, that those that are corrupt are going to be arrested, but please also help us in providing evidence where you have the evidence. And it's very important that as the media, you begin to play that role of exposing the corruption by bringing out the evidence. In the most cases, corruption does not come to the fore because those that are interested have no interest to report it to the police. There was mention of some police officers that are corrupt. They are not the only ones who are corrupt. The guy who is paying the police officer a bribe is corrupt. So that guy must equally be arrested. Because corruption does not happen when an individual is on his own or on her own. Corruption happens where two institutions or more interact. Now, so our corruption in Zimbabwe, and I know there's a lot of anger out there against the parastatals, against what was happening in the parastatals, and in some instances that what continues to happen. But that anger must be directed at the parastatals who are guilty, but also must be directed at those that have been participating in the process. And we have a case before the courts, which I'll not talk much in detail, but I'm sure all of you have been reporting about the developments at Air Zimbabwe, where there are allegations of corrupt activities involving insurance. Government does not own an insurance company that was involved in those things. Now, so it is one thing to have your anger directed at the Ministry of Transport, the Air Zimbabwe officials for failing to do their part, but you equally must be angry at those that induced officials in government or officials in parastatals to be corrupt. So corruption involves everyone. And I don't believe that we have a difficulty in fighting corruption if everyone was committed to fighting corruption. Every individual must stand up and say no to corruption. That's the only way we're going to kill corruption. Because everybody is a participant in corruption. So if your vehicle is about to be towed by a city council official because you have not paid your dues to the council, and you go and bribe the official from council, who is corrupt? Both of you are corrupt. So are you ready as private citizens to stop that behavior? Are you ready as private citizens to stop paying police officers if you are asked by a police officer to pay a bribe? Are you ready to stop doing that? Are you ready to go to the border at Byte Bridge with your goods imported from South Africa and openly declare the value that you are allowed to bring in duty-free? Are you ready to do that? Because you are busy in the bus trying to hide some goods, changing the receipts, and you say government is corrupt. No, you are also corrupt. So I am saying we need a national effort. And that national effort requires us to prick into the conscience of every Zimbabwean and say, ask yourself, is what you are doing or what you are about to do the right thing? It cannot be a responsibility of NGOs to fight corruption. It cannot be a responsibility of the Anti-Corruption Commission. It's just a commission with no more than 11 or 12 people. Fighting corruption requires the 14 million people in this country. And we need commitment. And I've just heard this morning that there's even corruption in churches. Now, when it gets to that level, it needs enormous commitment. In fact, one must question, in an era where we have a serious religious following, where one gathering is now attracting up to 200,000 followers for church, it means everybody is more religious than before. Why are we having more corruption in this kind of environment? So I think that we need to prick our own conscience and say, what is it that we should do ourselves to stop corruption? In conclusion, I believe that we must address or tackle corruption in a responsible way as media players, because we have a responsibility. One of the easiest ways to deal with corruption is to address the economy. When I grew up in Dangamvura, the milkman used to bring a packet full of milk, dump it at the corner, and go away. And people would go and pick up a packet of milk from that big packet and leave the amount of money necessary for their payment and leave the rest there. Can you do that today? No, you can't. Why can't you do it today? Because people have no sources of income. They have no jobs. How do you address that? You make sure that the economy is functioning. You make sure that you create jobs. You make sure that people earn enough money. How do you do that? You create an environment that attracts both domestic and international investors. How do you do that? You begin to speak positively about yourself as an individual, about yourselves as Zimbabweans, about your country. And how do you do that? By, at the individual level, at the institutional level, and in this particular case, at the media level. So if we celebrate that we are a corrupt country, or perceived to be a corrupt country, and we go all over the show, not emphasizing on how we are addressing these problems, but on how corrupt or perceived corruption that exists in the country, we are not helping our own situation. We have to be responsible in addressing some of these issues. So ladies and gentlemen, you and I have a responsibility, and you and I can shape the future of a corruption-free Zimbabwe. I thank you.
My question is directed to Dr. Matonga. I think it is open in remarks. You said you are a victim of a corrupt gangster that targets individuals. Can you tell us more about this corrupt gangster and how exactly you were a victim?
Thank you very much. I'm not going to mention names, but the point I'm trying to make was that my experience working in a parastatal is that it comes to procurement, whatever. If you buy buses, the people who are not at all related to that process, who then go to whoever is put a tender and say, look, that bus is going for 90,000, make it 120. I said, but no, how can I put 120? I said, no, this is what we want. If you don't, we will arrest you. And I was arrested. You see, so it's public knowledge. I was bitter initially, but I thought, let me use this process as an awareness campaign to say someone can be arrested. That's important why they said you should have enough evidence. You should investigate, have enough evidence and arrest. Sometimes people abuse the police. People abuse the system. Kuti ngati kumvise akangonzi asungwa kwanzi there is a drive president vari kuti drive ye anti-corruption. Saka ngati mubvise apa tikamusungisa abva then we put our person. So when you carry out your investigations as the media, musapiwe mari kuzenda muno because a story is given kuna a journalist wona yabuda in a paper as a bait for arresting someone. Because you see, saka people are prepared. So when you get these stories, please, it's important that you also investigate yourself. This is where also some form of corruption. Corrupt people target people who are not corrupt. Then they put their person, they approve that. So this is where I'm coming from. To say, let's also have victims. Or those that committed crime to say, hey, I took some money, but I realized it was not good. So it's important, Mr. Mdombe, let's be holistic when we deal with these issues. The positives and negatives. The people who committed crime and there are those that didn't. Let them share their experiences so that we can all fight corruption.